I thought her mom was trying to ruin us. Turns out she was saving me. It happened on a Saturday evening during one of those regular family dinners her side always hosted. Never at our place. Never at her mom's either. This time it was her aunt's turn, the one with the backyard full of mismatched patio chairs and half a dozen picture frames crooked on the living room walls. You know the type. Kids running wild, laughter bouncing off every surface, a potluck table groaning under too many casseroles, and not enough dessert. I wasn't particularly close with anyone on her side, but I went to every one of these get-togethers without fail. Part of the deal, I told myself. Be present, smile, shake hands, accept the sideways glances and subtle jokes. I could feel her mom's eyes on me from the moment we stepped in. Nothing unusual there. She never liked me, and I stopped trying to win her over years ago. Her politeness was always sharp-edged, her compliments suspiciously rare, and when she did offer one, it always had that pause afterward, like a "for now," hung silently in the air. I spent most of that evening like I always did, talking to her cousin about football, making small talk with her brother, sipping cheap red wine out of a solo cup, keeping out of the spotlight. At one point, after the dinner rush, but before dessert, someone called my name from the kitchen. Her mom said she needed help finding the dessert forks, that the drawers were a mess. Harmless enough. I followed, not thinking much of it. She stood by the counter when I walked in, rummaging for a second before stopping, one hand still inside the drawer. Then she turned her head slightly, no eye contact, and said something that made the air snap in two. "She's cheating on you." Just like that. 5 words. No emotion. No build-up. I froze mid-step, hands empty, heart stuttering. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh or say she was joking or anything to dull the blade she'd just driven into my spine. But she didn't even look up. She just kept digging through silverware like we were talking about the weather. I asked her to repeat herself, and she didn't. She just said, "Don't react. Go back out there like normal." Then she grabbed a handful of forks and walked past me like nothing happened. I stood there alone in that kitchen, every muscle in my body buzzing. I couldn't think straight. I felt like I'd stepped into an alternate version of reality, one where nothing made sense. Why would she say that? Why would she say it now? Why to me? I didn't go back out right away. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to look through drawers myself just to give my brain time to catch up. I thought maybe I'd misheard her, maybe she meant something else. Maybe this was just another one of her games. Because make no mistake, I never had a good relationship with her. She tolerated me. At best. From the start, she always found ways to put distance between me and her daughter. She'd invite her out without me, change plans last minute, ask loaded questions about our finances, subtly praise her daughter's exes. She once told me, straight to my face, that I didn't shine the way her daughter deserved. That one stuck with me. So yeah, I didn't trust her. That night, after I finally left the kitchen and sat down next to my wife again, everything felt different. She was laughing at something someone said, looking at me like nothing was wrong. I watched her smile, lean into the conversation, pour herself another drink, and all I could hear was her mom's voice echoing inside my skull. "She's cheating on you." I didn't taste my food the rest of the night. I didn't follow any of the conversations. I nodded when people talked to me, smiled when they joked, and kept my arm around her chair the way I always did, but I wasn't there. I was somewhere else. Somewhere darker. I started analyzing everything I'd ever dismissed. All those nights, she came home late and brushed off my questions. The way she angled her phone away sometimes. How distant she'd seemed the last few months, but always explained it away as stress from work. I thought we were just in a rut. That it was normal. Now I didn't know what to think. In the car ride home, I kept quiet. She asked if everything was okay, and I lied. I said I was just tired. She squeezed my hand and smiled. That smile nearly broke me. I nodded and looked out the window. Inside, I was screaming. I lay awake all night wondering what that moment in the kitchen really was. A warning? A trap? Did her mom genuinely want to help me? Or was this just her way of planting doubt? Slow poison to weaken our marriage from the inside out. Because the truth is, a part of me always believed she wanted me gone. She'd never been obvious about it. But it was there. In her disapproving looks. In how she always emphasized her daughter could have done anything with her life. How she never once called me family. Maybe this was her final move. Or maybe, for the first time, she was actually on my side. Either way, something had cracked open that night, and there was no way to close it again. The week after that dinner felt like I was walking around with a ticking time bomb in my chest and no idea when it would go off. I watched my wife closer than ever, but not in the way you'd expect. I wasn't looking for lipstick stains or receipts in the trash. I was watching the way she talked, moved, breathed. I was listening for the guilt in her laugh, the pause in her sentences, anything to confirm or deny what her mother had said. But everything seemed normal. Too normal. And maybe that's what unnerved me the most. The part that kept me up at night wasn't just the thought that my wife might be cheating. It was the question underneath that, why would her mother tell me? They were close. Ridiculously close. From what I'd seen over the years, their relationship was more like best friends than parent and child. They had weekly phone calls that lasted hours, inside jokes I was never part of, a whole language between them built over decades. My wife went to her mother for everything, career advice, emotional support, even for help planning our wedding. They went on weekend trips together every year, just the two of them. It wasn't unhealthy, at least not on the surface. But it was intense. Protective. She trusted her mom completely, sometimes more than she trusted me. And that was the second part of the equation that wouldn't leave me alone. My relationship with her mother had never been good. Not openly hostile, but always just a few degrees too cold. It started subtle, little remarks she made during the engagement like, "Are you sure he's the one?" Or, "You've got so much potential. Don't settle too early." I chalked it up to standard mother-in-law nerves. But it didn't stop after the wedding. There were always comparisons to her daughter's past. Exes who were more educated, more charismatic, more ambitious. I wasn't any of those things, and she never let me forget it. She never attacked directly, but everything she said landed like a gloved slap. During holidays, she made backhanded compliments. When I got a promotion once, she raised an eyebrow and asked if that meant I'd finally be able to afford a better car. She'd invite her daughter to events and somehow forget to include me in the plans. And yet she never quite crossed a line I could point to and say, that was cruel. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. So when she pulled me aside in that kitchen and told me her daughter was cheating, my first instinct wasn't to believe her. It was to assume she was manipulating me again, this time in a way that could actually destroy what I had. That was the most twisted part. She finally had the ammunition to blow everything up, and I couldn't tell if she was using it for my benefit or hers. The thought that haunted me most was the idea that she might be telling the truth not because she cared about me, but because she didn't. Maybe she'd seen cracks in our marriage and decided now was the time to press her advantage. Maybe she thought if she told me something like that, I'd implode on my own. Get paranoid. Get angry. Leave. Make it easy for her daughter to move on. Maybe she wanted me to be the one to break the marriage, so her daughter wouldn't have to. I couldn't shake that idea. That I was being played, not protected. Every interaction I'd ever had with her was now under a microscope in my mind. I remembered how, during our first year of marriage, she gave my wife a book called Knowing When to Walk Away, a subtle gesture I tried to laugh off at the time. I remembered how, when we had our first big fight, my wife left and stayed at her mom's for 3 nights. When she came back, she told me her mom said we'd just grown too different. I remembered the way her mom watched me during family dinners, not with curiosity, but calculation. Like she was waiting to see when I'd finally disappoint her enough to be discarded. But even with all of that, even with the years of coldness and judgment, I couldn't shake the look on her face in that kitchen. It wasn't smug. It wasn't gleeful. It wasn't even bitter. It was tired, resigned. Like someone who was about to make a move they didn't want to make, but knew they had to. I kept asking myself, if this was part of some manipulation, why wasn't she pushing harder? Why didn't she send me the proof right then and there? Why didn't she try to follow up afterward and make sure I acted on what she told me? There were no texts, no calls, no additional hints. Just that one statement. Just 5 words. That silence afterward, that absence of pressure, was what made it more real. Like she didn't want me to do anything with it. She just wanted me to know. And the worst part? My wife had no idea any of this was happening. She went on with her life like nothing was wrong, still smiling when I made breakfast, still kissing me on the cheek when she came home late, still making weekend plans like we had decades ahead of us. I didn't know how to look at her anymore. Every moment we shared felt haunted. Every conversation felt like a performance. But I played along, because I still wasn't sure what I believed. If her mom was telling the truth, I had to know for certain. If she was lying, I couldn't afford to blow up my marriage over spite. So I did the only thing I could. I waited. I waited to see what would happen next. I waited to see if her mother would say anything else, if the cracks would widen, if the truth would find a way to surface. I waited to see if the woman I loved was really who I thought she was. And deep down, I hoped I was wrong. The text came in the middle of a workday, short, friendly, and completely disarming. It was from her dad, asking if I had time that weekend to help him fix part of the fence that had shifted in the last storm. It wasn't unusual. I'd helped him with things around the house before. He was the kind of guy who preferred to call family over hiring someone, and I didn't mind. In fact, I usually appreciated the normalcy of it. But ever since that night at the family dinner, ever since her mother cornered me in the kitchen and dropped that sentence like a knife across my throat, I couldn't look at anything involving her family the same way. Still, there was nothing in the message that gave me reason to say no. So I told him I'd come by Saturday afternoon. When I arrived, everything seemed typical. He greeted me with his usual dry humor, showed me where the fence was leaning near the back of the yard, and handed me a pair of gloves. We worked side by side for a while, the way we always had. It was quiet, focused, broken only by the occasional laugh or complaint about the heat. If he knew what his wife had told me, he didn't let on. And if he didn't know, I wasn't about to bring it up. Part of me kept glancing toward the house, wondering if she was watching, if this was all leading somewhere. After about 2 hours, the repair was done. Her dad clapped me on the shoulder, thanked me, and headed inside, saying he was going to grab a beer and cool off. I stayed behind, wiping down the tools, trying to decide if I should leave too. That was when she appeared, her mother, standing at the patio door, holding her phone in both hands, eyes calm, like she'd been waiting for the right moment. She didn't say anything, just nodded her head slightly, and turned back into the house. And just like that, I followed. We didn't go far, just into the kitchen, the same place where this all started. She sat at the table and tapped her phone without a word, then slid it across to me. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe another vague comment, another loaded line meant to twist the knife. But instead, it was direct, open, honest. The phone screen lit up with a familiar name, my wife's, right at the top of a long, scrolling conversation. I recognized the chat layout immediately. This wasn't a forwarded message or something printed out to shock me. This was an open thread, a raw, unfiltered view into a conversation between mother and daughter. My stomach tightened as I started reading. It didn't take long. There were flirty exchanges, mentions of nights spent at a hotel, details I didn't want to see, a few selfies my wife had sent, dressed up, posed, little captions that made my skin crawl. One message from my wife said she felt conflicted, that I'd been treating her so well lately, and it made her feel even worse. The man replied with reassurance. He's good, but not exciting, he wrote. He'll never find out unless you want him to. The betrayal burned in slow motion. But then I saw something that hit even harder than the affair itself. My wife telling her mother everything. She said she knew it was wrong, but that she wasn't ready to stop. That part of her still wanted the rush, the excitement, and that she hoped her mom would understand and not judge her too harshly. She even said she couldn't talk to me about it because she didn't want to lose me. I stopped scrolling. I couldn't read more. I slid the phone back across the table, numb. My face must have said everything, because her mother just sat quietly for a moment before speaking. She trusts me with everything, she said. And this time she shouldn't have. I looked at her. For the first time since all this began, I truly looked at her. I asked why. Why show me this? Why betray her own daughter? After all these years of coldness toward me, of never quite accepting me as part of the family, why now? Her face didn't change, but her voice did. It softened, not with affection, but with weight. Because I've seen what betrayal does to people, she said. Not just from the outside. I lived it. When I was younger, before I met her father, I dated someone in college. We were together for nearly 3 years. I thought we were going to get married. I thought he was it. He wasn't. She paused. He cheated. For months. With someone I knew. I didn't find out until it was already over. And by the time I knew, he'd moved on, and I was left with nothing but questions. That pain stays. It reshapes how you see everything. She leaned forward slightly. I don't believe in love the way I used to. I married a good man. Yes, and we built a good life. But something broke back then that never fully healed. I learned to live without illusions. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. She continued. She thought I'd keep her secret, that I'd be her shield. But I won't protect her from consequences she brought on herself. I've seen what silence costs. I've seen what pretending does. I won't do that again. Not for her, not for anyone. I looked down at the table, trying to steady my breath. My wife had poured her heart out to her mother, expecting compassion. Instead, her mother handed that heart to me, still beating. And somehow, she did it without malice. Not to hurt her, but to save me. Or maybe to balance something from her own past. I walked out of that house with a weight I didn't know how to carry. I didn't call my wife. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I sat in the car for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The truth wasn't a wave. It wasn't fire. It was ice. Cold, creeping, and permanent. And it had finally settled into my bones. The entire drive home, my hands were clenched so tight around the steering wheel that my knuckles ached. I couldn't stop replaying the messages I'd read on her mother's phone. My wife's words. Her jokes, her excuses, her guilty little confessions. And worst of all, how comfortably she said them. There wasn't an ounce of fear in her texts, not a single hint that she believed what she was doing might be discovered. She didn't seem terrified of losing me. If anything, she sounded more afraid of disappointing her mother. That part hit harder than I expected. Because after all these years of feeling judged by her mom, after always thinking she wanted me out of the picture, I now realized she was the one who handed me the truth, while her daughter thought she never would. And still, I burned with the need to confront her. I didn't care where she was. I wanted to look her in the eye, ask her what I did to deserve this, force her to admit it, make her squirm, make her cry, make her feel half the weight I'd been carrying since that dinner night in the kitchen. I didn't want subtlety. I wanted a detonation. I wanted the truth to hit like glass exploding in every direction. But when I reached home, I didn't go inside. I sat in the car, engine ticking, and stared at the door. Then I pulled out my phone and texted her mother. Just 2 words, "Can we talk?" She replied almost instantly. 15 minutes later, I was back at their house, sitting in the same kitchen chair where my heart had cracked open a few hours earlier. She didn't offer me a drink this time. She just sat down across from me and waited. I told her I couldn't take it anymore, that I needed to tell my wife everything, that I couldn't live in this suspended agony of pretending things were fine, that I didn't want to sleep next to someone who looked me in the eye and told me she loved me while texting someone else hours earlier. I said I wanted to confront her tonight. She listened, quiet, arms folded, gaze steady. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You could," she said slowly. But she wouldn't learn anything from that. That stopped me. I asked her what she meant. She leaned forward and spoke in a calm, clinical tone, like someone explaining how to treat a wound. "If you go in there tonight and confront her, she'll cry. She'll apologize. Maybe she'll blame you. Maybe she'll beg. But deep down, she'll still think she got away with it for as long as she wanted. She'll think she was in control the whole time. And worst of all, she won't feel what you're feeling right now." I stared at her, unsure where she was going. She continued, "You want her to understand the weight of what she did? Let her live in it. Let her carry the secret. Let her fear every word she says. Wonder if something in your tone means you know. Let her spiral. Let her guilt eat her alive without the closure of a confrontation. Let her sit across from you every night and guess. Make her feel the slow unraveling you've been feeling since I told you in that kitchen." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It was methodical, measured. I realized in that moment that this wasn't about revenge for her. It was about justice, about balance. She wasn't trying to destroy her daughter. She was trying to make her grow up, to finally understand the consequences of playing with loyalty like it was optional. I didn't speak for a long time. The storm in me was still there, still thrashing. But something about her logic sank deeper than I wanted to admit. The idea of confrontation felt powerful, but temporary. It would explode and be over. But the idea of letting her live with it, letting her carry it silently until it broke her from the inside, that felt like truth. I nodded once, slowly. Her mother stood up, walked to the fridge, and finally poured herself a drink. She didn't toast. She didn't smile. She just said, "Wait. Watch. Let her reach the edge on her own." And that's exactly what I did. That night, I walked through the front door like nothing had changed. My wife was on the couch, scrolling her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up and smiled. I kissed her on the forehead, told her I was tired, and headed for the shower. I looked her in the eye, and I didn't flinch. She didn't notice the change. Not yet. But I could already feel the shift beginning. From that moment on, every word I said was carefully measured. Every smile, every gesture. I didn't accuse. I didn't question. I became calm, patient, almost too normal. And just like her mother predicted, that silence started to work. Slowly, subtly, I watched her begin to second-guess herself. I saw the way she looked at me a little longer when I laughed at the dinner table. I caught her watching my phone when I set it down on the counter. I saw the guilt flicker behind her eyes when I complimented her out of nowhere. And all the while, I said nothing. I let her live in the quiet. Let her drown in the secret she thought was still hers alone. But it wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. And I was going to use it better than she ever imagined. The silence did most of the work. Not mine, hers. My wife didn't notice anything the first few days. She kept texting, laughing at shows we watched, trying to pull me into light moments like nothing had shifted. But the calm I wore had changed tone. It was no longer the comfort of trust. It was the calm of distance. I wasn't colder. I wasn't harsher. I was just quieter, sharper in my timing, more precise in my kindness. I smiled at the right moments. I kissed her goodnight. But I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't linger in conversations. And I didn't look at her the way I used to. At first, she didn't flinch. But then the second wave began, her mother. I don't know what exactly she said during those phone calls, but I saw it happening in real time. One afternoon, my wife walked into the living room, phone still in hand, and sat down slower than usual. She looked at me, said she'd just spoken to her mom, and then paused. I didn't respond. I just nodded. She waited for me to ask what they talked about. I didn't. I went back to reading. That was the first crack. The next came a few days later, when her mom stopped by unannounced. My wife answered the door and looked confused to see her. They went to the kitchen, and though I couldn't hear the full conversation, the tone was unmistakable, low, serious, with long silences between short bursts of hushed words. After her mom left, she came into the bedroom and just sat there, quiet. I asked her if everything was all right. She said yes. I asked if she was sure. She nodded too fast. From then on, the spiral picked up. I watched it all unfold without needing to touch a single thread. She started calling her mom less, then more, then stopping again. Sometimes she'd hang up and go for a walk without a word. One night I heard her crying softly in the bathroom, door shut, shower running. I didn't go in. I just waited outside, leaning against the wall, letting her wonder if I'd heard anything. Her nerves were starting to fray. The guilt she thought she buried was surfacing in tiny gestures. She began asking me if I was happy more often. Little things like, "Are we good?" Or, "Is everything okay between us?" I always answered with a smile and a simple, "Yeah, of course." And that only seemed to make it worse. At dinner one night, she asked if I'd be okay if she took time off work. Said she was feeling mentally off. I told her to do whatever she needed to feel better. That same night, she didn't touch her food. I knew what her mother was doing, and I didn't ask for the details. But I could see the result. There was no screaming, no shaming, no dramatic lectures. Just a slow, steady application of pressure from someone she once relied on completely. Her mother didn't expose her secret, but she stopped shielding her from its consequences. And without that protection, my wife was flailing. It was like watching a perfectly balanced structure start to lean under invisible weight. And the more I stayed calm, the more that weight shifted. She became paranoid. I'd catch her checking my phone from across the room, pretending not to. One morning she asked if I still loved her before I even finished my coffee. That question didn't come from love, it came from fear. Something inside her had changed. The confidence she once carried, the smug ease of someone who believed they could have both worlds, had begun to rot. And the part that ate at her most was that no one had confronted her. Not me, not her mom. There were no accusations, no fights, just silence, cold and deliberate. One evening she came home earlier than usual, said she canceled plans with a friend. She cooked dinner from scratch, played one of my favorite old records, and even poured wine she normally didn't drink. She asked if we could watch our wedding video after dinner. I smiled and said sure. She wept halfway through it. Quietly. No scene. No sobbing. Just silent tears, hands folded in her lap. I asked if something was wrong. She shook her head. And when I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, I felt how stiff she was. Like every nerve in her body was braced for impact that never came. The next day, her mom called her at work. I don't know what was said, but when she came home, she looked like she hadn't slept. She didn't eat. She didn't talk. She just sat on the bed, phone in her lap, staring at nothing. I asked again if everything was okay. She smiled through it. Just tired, she said. That was the moment I knew she had broken it off. I could see it in her eyes, the ache, the emptiness, the regret. She hadn't said it out loud yet, but something in her had shifted from fear to mourning, and that meant her mother's plan was working. She was pulling away from the affair, not because I found out, but because the reality of her actions had finally caught up. The silence had done its job. Her mother's absence, the change in tone, the lack of rescue, the cool disappointment between their calls, had cracked the fantasy open. There was no celebration, no confession, no apology, just the slow withdrawal of everything that made her feel untouchable. And still, I said nothing. I let her sit with it. Let her carry the choice she made and the loss she couldn't explain. Let her realize that even without a single confrontation, the damage was already complete. And all I had to do was wait for her to finally admit it. Not to me, but to herself. It wasn't my wife who told me. It never was. The call came from her mother one evening, just after 9, completely unprompted, just a simple text first. Can we talk? I didn't hesitate. I stepped outside, walked halfway down the street with the phone pressed to my ear, trying to brace myself for whatever was about to follow. Her voice was calm, steady, but I knew right away something had shifted. She didn't waste time. She told me she ended it, she said. The affair. She says it's over. I didn't say anything. I let her talk, and she did. She said she wants to work on the marriage, that she feels ashamed, that she realizes what she almost lost. Then there was a pause, longer, heavier. But I told her it doesn't matter, her mother added. I told her some things you lose you don't get back. The silence after that stretched too long. She filled it with something even more surprising. I'm not going to speak to her for a while, she said. I've thought about it a lot. And the truth is, I don't respect her anymore. Not after what she did. Not after what she said to me while she was still doing it. I can't pretend I'm proud of her. I stood there in the dark, listening to her say it without emotion, without malice, just a plain and painful truth. Her daughter wasn't someone she admired anymore. She didn't just cheat on you, she added. She betrayed the person she used to be. And I don't know if she'll ever find her way back to that girl. I really don't. I thanked her quietly, told her I appreciated her honesty. And I meant it. From the moment she first pulled me aside weeks ago, she hadn't hesitated. She didn't protect her daughter's lies. She didn't hide behind family loyalty. She told the truth when it mattered. She gave me the dignity of knowing what I was standing in. And now, she gave me the final piece I needed. Closure. Not forgiveness. Not rage. Just the confirmation that there was nothing left to wait for. When I walked back inside, my wife was in the bedroom, half watching a show with the sound too low. I didn't look at her for long. I didn't say anything. I just went into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out a pen and notepad. I wrote one sentence, then underlined it, folded it, left it face down on the table next to the fruit bowl. It said, I know. Your mother told me. It's over. That was all. No confrontation. No shouting match. No demand for apologies or explanations. Just a statement of fact. And then I left. Quietly. I'd packed a small bag already. Just a few clothes, my documents, a charger. I'd been ready since the night I saw the messages. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even check to see if she heard me leave. I knew she'd find the notes soon enough. That was the moment her silence would begin. The one she couldn't control. In the days that followed, I got the texts you'd expect. The missed calls. The long paragraphs. The voice notes she probably re-recorded a dozen times. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I'd said what I needed to say, and it was only a few words. What came next, divorce, decisions, the legal parts, those would all play out in time. But emotionally, the story was already over. I stayed in touch with her mother. Not often, not like friends, but enough. We understood each other in a way we hadn't before. She didn't ask me to reconcile. She didn't try to justify what her daughter had done. She just checked in, occasionally, with quiet dignity and simple words. I knew she was hurting in her own way. Not because I left, but because she lost her daughter's trust. And maybe some of her love. But she'd made her choice. And so had I. The woman I once loved lost more than a marriage. She lost her lover, who vanished the moment she needed him to commit. She lost her mother, the only person she thought would always defend her. And she lost me, not in some fiery, screaming collapse, but in silence. Clean, quiet, final. Because sometimes the loudest punishment isn't anger. It's absence. If you were her mother, would you tell her husband about the betrayal or stay silent to protect your daughter?